Hello, it's Ellie here from The Earth's History is Confusing. Very confusing indeed. Okay, I've just been going over some few more information of star forts, and I had no idea. I knew that, they're everywhere in the world, but not to the extent that I've found, and the dates don't make sense. These countries are supposed to be fighting wars, and yet they're building these star forts that cost, hundreds of thousands of sterling silver pound. Like, how? And the amount of people that it would have needed to build them. So some of the dates don't make sense. I've found some that go back, like early before Christ. So, okay, let's have a look and see what we can find. So, this one here. This is Fort Marlborough. Okay. So I've pulled the tabs up to try and make it a bit easier, to try and make this quicker. So we got Fort Castalia, built in 1607. No, by the Portuguese in 1522. So 1522. Links will be put up in the description. Fort Kalamatra. It looks like here on this photo is how they probably found most of these forts, just covered in trees and nature regrowing. Okay. Fort Inglong Bali, located in a small hill along Kuringraya Bay. I apologise for saying this wrong. Overlooking the Indian Ocean. Fort was built in 1509 by I can't say that name. It served as accommodation for women whose husbands were killed in battle, as well as military training facility. Trained women soldiers in the Aceh Kingdom. Locations 100 meters above sea level, unhindered view of ships coming. There's not much in the descriptions of most of these. Lucky to find some of them. Okay, Fort Duurstede. This is like the forts I found in New Zealand. The shape of the forts. The Dutch map of the fort, 1700s. So I think they were built before the 1700s. I also starting to believe that, these could have been a battery, as in power battery. And they all seem to go along a line, like putting them on a map. A lot of them seem to line up. I'm wondering if they are on the ley lines and are a battery of some sort that harnesses energy. I notice a lot of sort of like antennas on some of them as well. Now, this is another name I've come across with star forts, is Citadel. It's just another name for the star forts. And a lot of the older star forts, I found one right in Jerusalem, right next to the Holy Mount Temple. It's called a citadel, and that goes back to before Christ. So if you're looking into the star forts, do a reference of citadel as well. Okay, so this one was built in 1837 by the Dutch Batavia, now Jakarta, in the Dutch East Indies, located in Wilhelma Park, demolished in 1961. So the site was once a location of a tavern built before 1669. 1723, Sergeant Major Herman van Balen rebuilt the tavern as a large country house. Later, from 1743 to 1820, the building was used as a hospital. The outer hospital, called the outer hospital because of the city walls. The location was considered healthy since it was in the low hills of Batavia, so the risk of malaria was low. The site would become what would become Park in Waltravian area. They all seem to have a lot of big arches in them as well. So to keep it short, I'll leave descriptions up in the links. Fort Dubas, another Dutch, built by the Dutch, a trading post established in 1828 on Trident Bay, southwest corner of New Guinea. And this is the only one I could find in Papua New Guinea. There seems to be no other in Papua New Guinea, and yeah, I'm looking into Papua New Guinea too. It was the first European settlement in the region. It was abandoned in 1835 due to unhealthy climate and attacks by natives. Now, I found a lot of them were also abandoned around 1812 to 1835. A lot have been. So I'll do a video on all the ones that have been abandoned around that date. Coast had been mapped 1825. So it was demolished in built in 1828 and demolished in 1835. So the dates just don't make sense. Fort de Kock, built on top of a hill. My apologies. Goodness, sorry. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been hanging around and watching these videos with me. I really appreciate it, and all new subscribers, thank you very much. Okay, Fort de Kock was built 19th century Dutch scone fortification. A scone is a small protective fortification such as an earthwork, often placed on a mound as a defensive work for artillery. It was used primarily in Northern Europe from the late Middle Ages until the 19th century. It's common during the English Civil War. Overlooks the hill and Buckhantimi. I'm sorry, I just can't say those words. I'm not even going to try. Around the fortification, new settlement grew, which eventually became the city of the second largest city in West Sumatra. Although the remnants of the mound and some cannons can still be seen, the original buildings on top of the scone have been demolished. Established in 1825. Used to be 20 meters high. Bantang Pendem Sitakap. Indonesian for buried fort. It is an abandoned Dutch fortress in the Cilacap Regency, Central Java, which has become the region's main tourist attraction. Built between 1861 and 79, the fortress originally served to defend the important port of Calcap. Although a series of changes of ownership, it fell into disrepairs in the 1960s. In 1987, it was opened to the public. The pentagon-shaped site covers 6.5 hectares, 16 acres, consistent of both buildings, includes a barrack, a clinic, and a prison, as well as several later additions. I found one of these ones had actually been hit by a 3-meter tsunami, and most of the other buildings in the area were totally demolished, but these weren't even destroyed. So it had an original moat, 10 meters deep, 33 meters feet around the fortifications. 11 places where cannons sit. So a lot of the structures are underground, located underground. There's a transportation of goods for trading. Fortress began operations in 1879. During the Japanese occupation, it was taken over by the Japanese. I think some of the Japanese used one of the other ones as a prisoner of war camp. Fell into disrepair, covered in sand. Storage facilities. So the barracks, water recreation. They all seem to have water either around them or a pond out the front of them. I don't know if water is part of the energy. Always seem to notice with these free energy devices there's always water around, whether it conducts it, I'm not sure. It's supposed to be 10 meter deep moat. And I think if you're looking for more photos, you can click on the Wilkie comments, and some of them will land you up for some of the photos. So Fort Belgalia, 17th century fort in Banda Neer in the Maluku Islands, Indonesia. The fort acted as a fortification system for the islands of Banda during a period that only took place when the World where, the only place in the world where nutmeg was produced. Okay, cool. So it was Portuguese, sitting on a hill, built with 1611. Peter Booth, first governor of Dutch Indies, instructed the construction on the new fort, and there was an original fort there. So that's what I mean, a lot of them were there already. 1662, this guy, Jan Peterson, ordered the renovation of the original fort so it was replaced with a more solid redoubt so it could accommodate 40 men. By the mid-17th centuries, earthquakes, the tropical monsoon climate, poor original construction materials and techniques have resulted in structure becoming dilapidated. In 1672, Governor Cornelius Spielman instructed engineer and Adrian Dulou to redesign and reconstruct the fort. The result is the present castle. Major modification work started in 1672, completed in 1673. So, what, 1 year? Yeah, no. Some of these dates just don't make sense. The other ingredients they said they used for the construction in these were bird poo, bird eggshells, for part of the cement. I'm not sure if that's true. It was the only fort of its kind. The design consisted of outer layer pentagonal structure, 5-angle corner bastions, higher inner pentagon with 5 taller circular towers, only fort of its kind. Surrendered to the British fleet in 1796 without a shot being fired. A lot of them seem to be handed over without a shot being fired, from what I read worldwide. Yeah, they're just... So this is what I mean. If you want to check out more with photos and media, check out the Wilkie Commons. You don't seem to, with the plans as well, you don't seem to have any real construction plans of the materials needed, the men needed, all those kinds of informational things. So I'll leave these links in the description for you guys. Okay. Batavia Castle. Now another word for these star forts, citadels, is the castles. Batavia Castle was a fort located at the mouth of the Silwang River in Jakarta. The castle was the administrative centre for the Dutch Indian Company in Asia. It was also the residence of the Governor General, chaired the Council of the Indies. And this guy, he seems to be very busy. He built a lot of forts around the same time. So, what, 1616, 1618, 2 houses, squared ones. The fort became known as Fort Jakarta. So a lot of these stories are just all the same from what I've read. That's why I just sort of scroll through it and keep going so it doesn't take as long. Anyone that's really into this wants to do a bit more studying, check out the links. So, most of the gates also look like arches, sort of like a teleport kind of invention as well. I also found pictures where they had photos of them, and like a picture, and some of the pictures had trees and some didn't, and it makes me wonder with a lot of these drawings whether things were just added in to make it look right, because it had no trees. Here it is here, what I was talking about. So here you can see, if you were in the inner courtyard, where it's got no trees, and then it's got trees. View of the residence, with trees, without trees. So something severe happened in the world around the 1600s as well. Just some of the history just doesn't seem to fit in. Fort Amsterdam, Ambion. Fort Amsterdam, formerly known as, I can't even say that, sorry, is a fort and a blockhouse in a hill of town. Lehutu sub-district. Blockhouse was built in 1637 by the Dutch East Indian Company, part of Britain. Blockhouse is a 3-floored structure, square plan, 16 by 16 metres, 47 centimetre thick walls. Interior is 4.57 by 5.3 metres inside. Each side of the building contains a window with a door on the eastern wall. Ground floor is covered with bricks, contains a prison, gunpowder magazine. The upper floor is wooden. Uppermost story is roofed. Contains 2 bastions in the northeast corner and the southeast corner. The corner of the building contains a watchtower. Blockhouse is surrounded by a square-shaped defensive wall measuring 52 by 52 metres, and the remains of the wall foundation measuring 62 by 30 metres, 5 metres. The main gate is on the east side, while 2 smaller doorless gates is located in the north and to the south. Fort Rotterdam. Fort Rotterdam is a 17th century fort in Makassar, in the island of Sulawesi, in Indonesia. It's a Dutch fort built on top of an existing fort, so it's built on top of an existing in the 1600s of the Guam Kingdom. It seems to be that bird again. The first fort on the site was constructed by the local sultan around 1634 to counter Dutch encroachments. The site was ceded to the Dutch under the Treaty of Bongaya, and they completely rebuilt it between 1673 and 1679. Had 6 bastions surrounded by a 7-metre high rampart and a 2-metre deep moat. The fort was the Dutch regional military and government headquarters until the 1930s. It was extensively restored in the 1970s, now a cultural centre. So some of the history dates back to 1545. This is where I find everything is just so conflicting with dates. So the description of it, Fort Rotterdam lies in the centre of Makassar. It is rectangular in shape, surrounded by a 7-metre wall, originally equipped with 6 bullocks, 5 of which are still visible. Bastion Bone after Bone State to the west. Button Island to the north. Some of the bastions still contain cannons. It's possible to walk over the most ramparts. 2-metre deep moat system used to surround the perimeter of the fort. However, only the southwest portion of the moat can be seen. Inside the fort are 13 buildings, 11 of them are 17th century original buildings. Most of them are still in good condition. The centre of the fort is a church, of course. I think the church was where they sort of had the power resonate out to the populace. So these onto manuscripts, I've been looking into these. They're where they etched into palm, like the palm leaves were treated, and then they etched it, they treated and smoked them, then they etched into them, and then they put a dye over that, then they covered it with some sort of lacquer. And some of them still exist today, and they go back to the 5th century, 5 CE before Christ. So there's a lot of information there. Still researching this. This is where I'm finding the dates and the names are so conflicting. That's what it looked like there. It's amazing it's still standing after how many earthquakes Indonesia has. Fort Nassau, Banda Islands. Fort Nassau was the first Dutch-built fort on Banda Island, the main island of Banda Island, part of the Maluku in Indonesia, completed in 1609. So the purpose was to control trade in the nutmeg, and which was the only time grown there. Portuguese had previously attempted to build a fort on this location in 1529, but after constructing the foundations, they abandoned the work due to hostility from the Beninese people. 25th April 1609, Dutch fleet commander Admiral Van Houwen sent 750 soldiers ashore to complete their fort, choosing the Portuguese foundations as the location. The Beninese, threatened by the new fort and the strength by the Dutch presence, and opposed the Dutch plan to monopolise the Beninese nutmeg industry. They attacked the Dutch, killing the admiral and 40 of his men. The Dutch hurried the fort to completion, and it served as their principal administration and military base, later supplemented by 4 other forts on Banda Bassenaire, Fort Hollander, Fort Concordia, and Fort Revenge. Fort Nassau was a large 4-bastion quadrilateral structure located by the channel between Banda and Banda Bissau Islands. Today, Fort Nassau looks overlooked by a more impressive Fort Belgacia, currently damaged and dilapidated. However, 2 bastions and substantial walls can be seen. So the dates are conflicting. It says one of the first in the area, but the other dates go back further than that on the other pages. Most of them seem to have a church in the middle as well. I counted about 25 or 26 in Indonesia. Fort Onjay is a 17th century Dutch fort located in the centre of Ternate City in the Ternate, one of the Moluccas in Indonesia. The fort is the largest on the island. Fort Onjay was once the capital of Dutch India Company. Now it's said back there on the other page that the other fort was the sole place of it trading, and it was where the governor was. So some of it's just conflicting. It's located on a small volcanic island in the Maluku Islands, the Moluccas. It was the centre of a powerful former sultanate or ternate. The island was once the world's singular major producer of cloves, a commodity which allowed the sultanate to become among the most powerful in the region. At the end of the 15th century, they had adopted Islam as their official religion, which was influenced from the Javanese. First Europeans arrived. Was it 1512? Gave permission for the Portuguese to build a fort. The fort began in 1522. However, the relationship broke down. They expelled him in 1575 after a 5-year siege. In 1599, 2 Dutch ships arrived, and they succeeded in 1605 driving the Portuguese out of the island, but in 1606 the Spanish troops captured the former Portuguese fort and deported the Sultan. Fort is the largest fort in the Ternate Island, rectangular in form, consists of 4 stone bulwarks, thick walls, deep moat, mainly cannons, despite frequent earthquakes. In Ternate, the walls of the fort are still in good condition. Some area of the fort, especially Eastern Park, has been refurbished into a park. The interior of the fort is now used by a local army garrison, boarding house for the local police families, which means the interior is not very well maintained and the ground is littered with rubbish. Other government offices are also set inside the fort. They all seem to have a tower like that in the middle as well. Otana Fortress. Otana Fortress is one of a tourism site in the Grotono Leo Promise. Sorry for saying that wrong. Built in 1522. and Portuguese sailors set to strengthen it. And it was made, this is where I found that, made a mixture of sand, calcium, and eggs of the Malaya birds. To reach the top of this fort, there are 348 steps, which separate into 4 stopovers, 52 from the base to this first stopover, 83 steps from the first to the second, 53 from the third to stopover, and 89 steps from the third to the fourth stopover. From the last stopover, there are another 71 steps to reach the fort. From the top of this fort, there are panoramic views of Limberto Lake, some part of the Guadalcanal region. According to history, in the 15th century, Portuguese sailors stopped because it come bad weather and a pirate threat and lack of food. They offered the king to build 3 fortresses on the top of the hill, protect his area. The king had 2 daughters. After his construction, the princes found out the Portuguese had misused the kingdom's kindness as an instrument to drive their pirates' enemies away, and the people turned their backs on them. 1585, a bloke accidentally found the fortress, used it as a shelter of his wife and their 2 sons, and during the war. Portuguese fort, Jepara. The so-called Portuguese fort, or the Benteng Portuguese, is a historical fort located in the village, I can't say that, sorry, adjacent to the village of, again I can't say it, I'm not going to try and offend these people, district of Keling, district of Jepara, province of Central Java, Indonesia. Said that the fortress was built by Governor Mantrum 1613 to 1645 with partnership with the Portuguese as central defence to repel the enemy who came from the Java Sea, referring to the Dutch. Currently, the Portuguese fort is one of the leading tourist districts of Japan. The location of the fort is adjacent to the Mankandila Island. Fort Rotterdam, this is the one I showed you at the start. Fort Somba Opu, fortified commercial centre, can't say that. Its remnants is located in the Makassar, southwest Sulawesi. Fort was one of the centre of 16th century until its destruction by the Dutch East India Company in 1669. It was one of the most difficult campaigns the company had ever undertaken in the east to get it. It's one of the oldest areas, elevated ground, it's north of the river, 6 kilometres from the mouth. It features walls which encompass a very large area. Perimeter totals about 2 kilometres. There's a sacred coronation stone on which new rulers took their oaths of office, and the sacred spring, tombs of the rulers. Many Chinese and Sarawak porcelain were discovered in these sites. It was a trading post. (1669) June 14, they ignited explosives in a tunnel. Blast created an opening about 27.5 metre side of the wall. The fort defenders reacted by sending 25 warriors to block the attacks from breaching, while others erected wooden stakes close to the hole. The Dutch made certain that no one had ever used the fort by throwing all the guns found on the ramparts. 33 cannons weighing about 46,000 pounds, 21,000 kilograms, even weighing about 24,000 pounds, 145 small guns, 83 gun chambers, 2 stone throwers, 63 muskets, 23 arquebuses, 127 barrel muskets, and 8,483 bullets. The bricks of the walls were used for Dutch buildings or local populations, wells, house foundations. Fort dilapidated further because of its location. So it was rediscovered in the 1980s. So they obviously didn't even know, well, recent governments probably didn't know that these were here. Reconstructed in 1990. A 9-meter cannon had been discovered on the fort, as well as other artifacts. The fort was somewhat forgotten. It's strange that very little attention has either been paid by the Dutch or Indonesians to the strongest fort ever built by Indonesians, as well as the scene of one of the fiercest battles they ever had to fight. Okay, it was a rectangular shaped fort, about 240 times 500 meters, with bastions on each corner. So it was quite a decent sized. Fort Tuluku, a small fortification to the east coast. Ternate, facing Hammer. I can't say that again. Sorry. It was one of the colonial forts built to control the trade in clove spices, which prior to the 18th century was only found on these islands. It had been vastly occupied by the Portuguese, abandoned the fort in 1864, renovated in 1996, and is now a tourist attraction. 6 meters tall, 20-foot stone fort sitting on a cape about 10.5 feet, 34 foot above sea level. Some people might laugh about the shape of this one. So the construction dates again just don't add up. So it was there in 1651. I think it was there 1577. So it's very old. Never seen a fort like that until now. Okay, Fort Vandenbosch. Fort Vandenbosch, known as Bentang Pandem, sunken fort, is a fort located in the Palim administrative village, East Java. It's 19th century, known as the centre of trade, coped with the Java War. The fight against the Dutch in each region was started by each of the region's local rulers. 1825, the Dutch managed to capture Nuku'au, maintain their position. The fort was finished in 1845, equipped with rooms for 250 soldiers, 6 cannons, 60 cavalries. During their Japanese occupation, the fort was converted into a civilian camp for men and boys. From February 1943 to 44, about 1,580 men, including Brits and Americans, were imprisoned. They were prisoners of war. It was listed as a prison. Natives were employed as the guards, some internees, reused as a civilian camp after that. It's 165 metres by 80 metres inside with 15 hectares. The fort is situated on the confluence of the Ben Wag Solo Meter River. The fort was built lower than the surrounding terrain, hence the nickname of the sunken fort. The multi-fort fort contains hundreds of rooms for military uses. And see, that's the other thing. We've never really seen, like I've seen some of the Australian ones, but the ones overseas are much bigger, and we don't know what's in underneath there, the tunnels. And I actually wonder, do those tunnels link up to some sort of underground network? Are these forts, they're all the same sort of design, do they all link up? You know, are they some sort of way you went places and got different commodities from different areas? It's just a path I was looking at. Fort Daniel van der Kaplan, small 19th century fort. Town of Butskeringa grew considerably. So even they are saying so-called wars. So-called people did this, or so-called people did that. It was built so-called during the war between the Paradids and the so-called Adtets. The Paradids were basically, I can't say that word, Muslim clerics who studied in Saudi Arabia, inspired by Mohammedanism, and decided to impose this Sharia among the indigenous people. The Adets, on the other hand, consisted of nobility, and the chiefs were loyal to a highly syncretic interpretation of Islam, which had intermingled with the tradition of Adet or customary law, such as the practice of materialism, which is against the principle of Wahhabism. The Adets asked for the help from the Dutch, who intervened from 1821 and helped to the nobility to defeat the Paradids. So it's highest ground, 500 meters from the city centre. Construction was finished 1824. Small fort surrounded by 75 metre thick, 30 inches walls, and 4 metre high, 13 feet. So the walls are 30 inches and 13 feet high. During the Japanese occupation, the fort was under control of the Indonesia military. After the independence, they went back. The Dutch briefly captured the fort from 1948 to 50 during the conservation in the fully fledged independent Indonesia. 1955 it was transferred back. The original clay tile roof has been replaced with corrugated steel. 1974. The dry moat had been refilled in 1986. Fort Bastenburg. So I'm just going to have to start slowing through these. This was the only one I found that had a drawbridge. The only one in this area that I found with a drawbridge. That was its moat. Fort Bastions. 1743. So I'll just try and speed along here to help you guys. Fort Vandenberg Museum. Former fort. Now museum. Fort William I, Canberra. Constructed between 1834 and 1853. Second William Fort, late 18th century Dutch. Dates are unknown. Okay. Alright guys, so I just want to say thank you if you're still here at the end. Hit that like, and it'd be great if some of you guys would subscribe. I'm noticing a lot of viewers aren't subscribers, so hit that subscribe and come back, and I'm going to keep doing a series on star forts, and currently make up a video on Google Maps of all the forts on the world. It's taking me a little while, but we're getting there, so let's just have a quick look at some of them. No, it's not going to let me zoom in. It'll probably take too long, so. Okay. Alright, thank you guys. See ya.